Welcome back. We are about to read the last in our series investigating what Marx and Engels had to say about the dictatorship of the proletariat. This will be the postscript to the Civil War in France, written in 1871. This was 1891 introduction by Friedrich Engels on the 20th anniversary of the Paris Commune. So we've learned a lot from the previous sections, but let's get directly into this. So, postscript with a footnote at the very beginning. At the time Engels wrote the introduction, he was writing for the large audience who had already read the popular book by Marx. His intention was to give new historical data, making for a preface that would remind readers of the content inside the book, but also provide additional postscript information to prompt the reader to reread the whole work in whole. In this publication, we have put the postscript information into this file, and the historical background and detailed account of the Civil War into the introduction. In the original document, the introductory information was placed before the section above, i.e., following the paragraph ending, quote, as has never again been attained on all the mass of literature which has been written on this subject, end quote. Okay, sorry. I did not anticipate that I would be asked to prepare a new edition for the address of the General Council of the International on the Civil War in France, and to write an introduction to it. Therefore, I can only touch briefly here on the most important points. I'm prefacing the longer work mentioned above by the two shorter addresses on the General Council on the Franco-Prussian War, chapters 1 and 2. In the first place, because of the second of these, which itself cannot be fully understood without the first, is referred to in the Civil War, but also because these two addresses, likewise drafted by Marx, are, no less than the Civil War, outstanding examples of the author's remarkable gift, first proved in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, for grasping clearly the character, the import, and the necessary consequence of great historical events, at a time when these events are still in process before our eyes, or have only just taken place. And finally, because we in Germany are still having to endure the consequences which Marx prophesied would follow from these events. Has that which was declared in the first address not come to pass? That of Germany's defensive war against Louis Bonaparte degenerated into a war of conquest against the French people, all the misfortunes which befell Germany after the so-called Wars of Liberation would revive again with renewed intensity. And footnote, the National Liberation War of the German people against Napoleon's rule in 1813 to 14. Back to the text. Have we not had a further 20 years of Bismarck's government, the exceptional law, and the anti-socialist campaign taking place at the prosecution of demagogues, with the same arbitrary police measures and with literally the same staggering interpretations of the law? Footnote, in the 1820s in Germany, demagogues was applied to participants of the opposition movement along with the German intelligentsia, who came out against the reactionary political system in the German states and advocated the unification of Germany. Demagogues were ruthlessly persecuted by the authorities. And the anti-socialist exceptional law, or the law of exclusion, was a law which outlawed socialist and communist organizations and ideas in Germany. Bismarck was aware of the growing power and prospects of the working class ever since he had become Prussian Chancellor in 1862. After the Franco-Prussian War, however, his armies had to contend with the threat of the Paris Commune. Bismarck, a keen opportunist, patiently waited for the impetus to assault the popular movement, while being constantly antagonistic but relatively discreet. In 1878, there were two attempts on the life of Kaiser Wilhelm I. The first was on May 11th by a tin worker named Hodel, who fired at but missed the Kaiser. He was executed on August 16th at Moabit. The second attempt was made by Dr. Karl Nobiling, who shot and wounded the Kaiser and then shot himself on June 2nd. This was the opportunity Bismarck needed, though the Social Democrats had nothing to do with it. The first attempt Bismarck made was defeated in the Reichstag after a debate May 23rd to 24th by 250 votes to 51 votes to 57. After the second attempt on the Kaiser, however, Bismarck dissolved the Reichstag on June 11th, and new elections were held on July 30th, at which Bismarck gained 38 seats. On October 18th, the new Reichstag passed a law by 221 votes to 149. Regardless, the law was put into operation even before it was passed. The law outlawed all social democratic organization, the name German socialists used at the time, all working class organizations, all working class or socialist presses, and ordered the confiscation of all socialist literature by the state. Social Democrats and various other pro-working class groups were arrested and deported. 900 workers were expelled from their homes, 1,500 sentenced to various terms of imprisonment, 1,300 publications were suspended, and 332 organizations of workers were forcibly dissolved. The Social Democratic Party would not waver under the pressure, however, and adapted itself to underground tactics. The party began publishing the paper Social Democrat in Switzerland. The party held regular congresses, 1880, 83, and 87, operating under a central committee. Using what legal means it could, the party strengthened its ties with the workers of Germany, and its influence grew steadily. From 1878 to 90, the number of votes it polled in the Reichstag elections more than tripled. The mounting pressure of the underground working class, coupled with growing popular support, repealed the anti-socialist law. The law had been renewed until 1890, when Bismarck was dropped. It was reinstated nearly 40 years later by the Nazis. Back to the text. And has not the prophecy, in this case, I assume that he's talking about, oh, I see. Okay. Been proved to the letter that the annexation of Alsace-Lorraine would, quote, force France into the arms of Russia, and that after this annexation, Germany must either become the avowed tool of Russia, or must, after some short respite, arm for a new war, and, moreover, quote, a race war against the combined Slavonic and Roman races, end quote. Has not the annexation of the French provinces driven France into the arms of Russia? Has not Bismarck for fully 20 years vainly wooed the favor of the Tsar, wooed it with services even more lowly than those in which Little Prussia, before it became the, quote, first power in Europe, was wont to lay at Holy Russia's feet? And is there not every day hanging over the heads the Damocles sword of war, on the first day of which all the chartered covenants of princes will be scattered like chaff, a war of which nothing is certain but the absolute uncertainty of its outcome, a race war which will subject the whole Europe to devastation by 15 or 20 million armed men, and is not already raging because even the strongest of the great military states shrunk before the absolute incalculability of its final outcome. All the more is it our duty to make accessible to the German workers these brilliant proofs, now half forgotten, of the far-sightedness of the international working class policy in 1870. What is true of these two addresses is also true of the Civil War in France. On May 28th, the last fighters of the Commune succumbed to superior forces on the slopes of Belleville, and only 2 days later, on March 30th, Marx read to the General Council the work in which the historical significance of the Paris Commune is delineated in short, powerful strokes, but with such clearness, and above all such truth, as has never again been attained on all the massive literature which has been written on the subject. If today we look back at the activity and historical significance of the Paris Commune of 1871, we shall find it necessary to make a few additions to the account given in the Civil War of France. The members of the Commune were divided into a majority of the Blanquists, who had been predominant in the Central Committee of the National Guard, and minority, member of the International Workingmen's Association, chiefly consisting of adherents of the Proudhon school of socialism. The great majority of the Blanquists at the time were socialists only by revolutionary and proletarian instinct. Only a few had attained greater clarity on the essential principles, through Vaillant, who was familiar with German scientific socialism. It is therefore comprehensible that in the economic sphere much was left undone, according to our view today, the Commune ought to have done. The hardest thing to understand is certainly the holy awe with which they remained standing steadfast, respectively, outside the gates of the Bank of France. This was also a serious political mistake. The bank in the hands of the Commune, this would have been worth more than 10,000 hostages. It would have meant the pressure to hold the French bourgeoisie on the Versailles government in favor of peace with the Commune. But what is still more wonderful is the correctness of so much of that was actually done by the Commune. Composed of it was by the Blankets and Proudhonists. Naturally, the Proudhonists were chiefly responsible for the economic decrees of the Commune, both for their praiseworthy and their unpraiseworthy aspects, as the Blankets were for its political actions and omissions. In both cases, the irony of history willed, as is usual when doctrinaires come to helm, that both did the opposite of what the doctrines of their schools prescribed. Proudhon, the socialist of the small peasant and the master craftsman, regarded association with positive hatred. He said that there was more bad than good in it, that was by nature sterile, even harmful, because it was a fetter on the freedom of the workers, that was a pure dogma, unproductive and burdensome, in conflict as much with the freedom of the workers as with economy of labor, that its disadvantages multiplied more swiftly than its advantages. That, as compared with it, competition, division of labor, and private property were economic forces. Only for the exceptional cases, as Proudhon called them, of large-scale industry and large industrial units, such as railways, was there any place for the association of workers. By 1871, even in Paris, at the center of handicrafts, large-scale industry had already so much ceased to be an exceptional case, that by far the most important decree of the Commune instituted an organization of large-scale industry and even of manufacture that was not based only on the association of workers in each factory, but also aimed at combining all these associations into one great union. In short, an organization which, as Marx rightly says in the Civil War, must necessarily have led in the end to communism, that is to say, the direct antithesis to the Proudhon doctrine, and therefore the Commune was also the grave of the Proudhon school of socialism. Today the school has vanished from French working class circles. Among them now, among the possibilists, no less than among the Marxists, quote unquote, Marxist theory rules unchallenged. Only among the, quote, radical bourgeoisie are there still Proudhonists. I'll take that. The Blankets fare no better. Brought up in the school of conspiracy and held together by the strict discipline which went with it, they started out from the viewpoint that a relatively small number of resolute, well-organized men would be able, at a given favorable moment, not only to seize the solemn state, but also by energetic and relentless action to keep power until they succeeded in drawing the mass of the people into the revolution and ranging them round the small band of leaders. This conception involved, above all, the strictest dictatorship and centralization of all power in the hands of the new revolutionary government. And what did the Commune, with its majority of these same Blankets, actually do? In all of its proclamations to the French in the provinces, it appealed to them a form free of all French communes in Paris, national organization, which for the first time was really to be created by the nation itself. It was precisely a pressing of power to former centralized government, army, political force, and bureaucracy, which Napoleon had created in 1798, and since then had taken over by every new government as a welcome instrument to be used against its opponents. It was precisely this power which is to fall everywhere, just as it has already fallen in Paris. Okay, that. From the outset, the Commune was compelled to recognize that the working class, once come to power, could not manage with the old state machine, and in order not to lose again with its only just conquered supremacy, this working class must, on the one hand, do away with all the old repressive machinery previously used against itself, and on the other, safeguard itself with its own deputies and officials by declaring them all, without exception, subject to recall at any moment. What had been the characteristic attribute of the former state? Society had created its own organs to look after its common interests, originally through simple division of labor. But these organs, at whose head was the state power, had in the course of time, in pursuance of their own special interests, transformed themselves from the servants of society into the masters of society, as can be seen, for example, not only in the hereditary monarchy, but equally also in the democratic republic. Nowhere do, quote, politicians form a more separate, powerful section of the nation than in North America. There, each of the two great parties which alternately succeed each other in power is itself in turn controlled by people who make a business of politics, who speculate on seats in the legislative assemblies of the Union as well as in the separate states, or who make a living by carrying on agitation for their party and on its victory are rewarded with positions. Yeah, this is written in 1891. Just saying. It is well known that the Americans have been striving for 30 years to shake off this yoke, which has become intolerable. And in spite of that, of all they can do is continue to sink ever deeper into the swamp of corruption. It's precisely in America that we see best how there takes place this process of the state power making itself independent in relation to society, whose mere instrument it was originally intended to be. Here there exists no dynasty, no nobility, no standing army, beyond a few men keeping watch on the Indians, no bureaucracy with permanent posts or the right to pensions, and nevertheless we find here two great gangs of political speculators, who alternatively take possession of the state power and exploit it by the most corrupt means and for the most corrupt ends. And the nation is powerless against these two great cartels of politicians, who are ostensibly its servants, but in reality exploit and plunder it. I'm just going to take this because it is so fucking true. Against this transformation of the state and the organs of the state from servants, of society into masters of society, an inevitable transformation in all previous states, the Commune made use of two infallible expedients. In the first place, filled all posts, administrative, judicial, and educational, by election on the basis of universal suffrage of all concerned, with the right of the same electors to recall their delegate at any time. In the second place, all officials, high or low, were paid only the wages received by other workers. The highest salary paid by the Commune to anyone, was 6,000 francs. In this way, an effective barrier to place hunting and careerism was set up. Even apart from the binding mandates to delegates to representative bodies, which were also added in profusion. Okay. I guess I'll just take the entire thing. Okay. This shattering of the former state power and its replacement by a new and really democratic state is described in detail in the third section of the Civil War. But it was necessary to dwell briefly here once more on some of its features, because in Germany particularly, the superstitious belief in the state has been carried over from philosophy into the general consciousness of the bourgeoisie and even to many workers. According to the philosophical notion, quote, the state is a realization of the idea, end quote, or the kingdom of God on earth, translated into philosophical terms, the sphere in which eternal truth and justice is or should be realized. In other words, you just have to continually workshop and perfect the state. There's no internal structural issues with it. This is a common view with liberals. No, don't reject the two-party system. Don't reject the bourgeois relations. Instead, we have to do these small-scale, tiny fixes over time and just trust the system. Back to the text. And from this follows a superstitious reverence for the state and everything connected with it, which takes root the more readily as people from their childhood are accustomed to imagine that the affairs and interests common to the whole society could not be looked after otherwise than they have all been looked after in the past, that is, through the state and its well-paid officials. And people think they have taken quite extraordinarily bold step forward when they rid themselves in belief of hereditary monarchy and swear by the democratic republic. In reality, however, the state is nothing but a machine for the oppression of one class by another. Indeed, in the democratic republic, no less than the monarchy. And at best an evil inherited by the proletariat after its victorious struggle for class supremacy, whose worst sides the proletariat, just like the Commune, cannot avoid having to lop off at the earliest possible moment, until such time as a new generation, reared in new and free social conditions, will be able to throw the entire lumber of the state on the scrap heap. Okay. Of late, the social democratic Philistine has once more been filled with wholesome terror at the words dictatorship of the proletariat. Well and good, gentlemen. Do you want to know what this dictatorship looks like? Look at the Paris Commune. That was the dictatorship of the proletariat. Friedrich Engels. London on the 20th anniversary of the Paris Commune. March 18th, 1891. Okay, and that is the end of this text. We will be deciding whether for the next section of this investigation, because we're done with Marx and Engels on the dictatorship of the proletariat for the time being, I will come back later and put together a full compilation of the various things that we have read in order to be able to say, okay, this is exactly what they had in mind based on all the different things that were written by them on this topic, same as with the communist mode of production, so on and so forth. The other things that we are going to be looking into are as follows. One, worker organization required to establish the dictatorship of the proletariat. This would involve analysis of worker councils, the party form, so on and so forth. This is one option that we could go down. It will not be focusing on Marx and Engels while they were involved in party politics and talked about it. I think that this in particular has evolved over time. The next would be more investigation into the communist mode of production. Only in this case, it would be writers after Marx and Engels. And within this, the reading list that I have prepared is very extensive. We'll probably be trying to break it down some. This would include Women in Socialism by August Bebel, 1879. Some sections of The Conquest of Bread by Kropotkin in 1892. The Group of International Communists Fundamental Principles of Communist Production and Distribution in 1930. Paul Maddox Was Communism in 1934, and Worker Councils and Communist Organization of Economy in 1935. Tsushima's Understanding Labor Certificates on the Basis of the Theory of Value, 1956. Carden, The Meaning of Socialism, 1965. Blanc, A World Without Money, Communism, 1975. Paul Cockshott, Towards a New Socialism, 1993. Hudis's Marxist Concept of the Alternative to Capital, 2012. And Chattopadhyay, Marx's Associated Mode of Production, A Critique of Marxism, 2016, and Socialism and Commodity Production, 2018. The other thing that we could do a reading of would be post-Marx writers analyzing the dictatorship of the proletariat, a continuation of what we have just completed here. This would include and not be limited to Lenin's Material for the Preparation of the Program of the RSDLP, Notes on Plekhanov's Second Draft Program from 1902, Rosa Luxemburg's The Mass Strike, 1906, Lenin Again in the State and Revolution, 1917, Kautsky's Dictatorship of the Proletariat, 1918, Lenin Again with the Proletarian Revolution and Renegade Kautsky, 1918, Luxemburg's The Russian Revolution, 1918 again, and Rosa Luxemburg's What Does the Spartacus League Want? December 1918, Martov, Marx and the Dictatorship of the Proletariat, 1918. Lots of stuff from 1918. Very busy period. Lenin's The Dictatorship of the Proletariat in 1919. Leninism under Lenin, 1929. That was written. I did my thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Proletarian Dictatorship and Class Party by the International Communist Party. Draper's Marx and the Dictatorship of the Proletariat, 1962. Rubel, The Dictatorship of the Proletariat, 1976. Balibar on the Dictatorship of the Proletariat, 1977. Johnson, Is a Marxist Tradition Democratic, 1981. Basic Principles of Marxism-Leninism, a primer by Jose Marie Sasson, 1982. Johnson, Marx, Blanqui, and Majority Rule. Johnson's Marx, Blanqui, and Majority Rule, 1983. And again, Draper's The Dictatorship of Proletariat from Marx to Lenin, 1987. I do not have a reading list yet for the party form or analysis in worker organization. But I will get back to you guys on that, and I will make a poll for deciding where we go from there. In the meantime, thank you for attending, and I do not believe I will be able to attend tomorrow. I will let you know later. Have a great night, everybody.